It's obviously early on a Monday, but it really does look almost entirely different than what it once did, for sure. Before you'd come on a Friday or Saturday, there would just be people for blocks and blocks. You just kind of took your safety for granted. You have a police force in Minneapolis that's down about 40% from where it was at the beginning of May of 2020.
So back to 2020, the George Floyd incident happens. How quickly was it that the riots began and that you felt the unrest growing?
It was really by the second night that you knew you were, not safe. This is when the fires started. I worked at the local CBS station for nearly 15 years in all, but was married to the president of the police union, who was a longtime Minneapolis police lieutenant. That summer, we had 4 different protests at our house. One in which they brought piñatas of my husband and myself. We were beating piñata effigy in our driveway. There's about 150 BLM people there that day. But I was canceled. I was kicked off the air, essentially, demoted from my anchor role that I held, and had to look for another job. I always really believed in, kind of balancing the news and whatnot, but I really saw things change with COVID and especially with this George Floyd story in the sense that we weren't telling the public the full picture. We were helping to sort of, craft this narrative, and we were just fine pushing this on the public when we knew it wasn't true. I knew there was so much more going on with this, and I couldn't understand for the life of me why we weren't telling our viewers what the real story was.
Yeah.
These officers went to work that day, they followed their policy, and they're lifelong felons. They were thrown in prison for that. They saw evidence being manipulated in that case. The officers in the 3rd precinct were basically fed to the mob. They were used as political pawns. They can't chase people in the city anymore. It's a use of force. If they handcuff someone, they have to call a supervisor. A lot of them, they rethink their every move, if you will. It's almost as if police officers have become like firefighters, sort of, waiting to put out the fire. Whereas before there was proactive policing, there would be more interaction that way, and there was also a respect and a bit of a, fear of the cops and whatnot. But that dynamic has certainly changed.
You have been covering Minnesota politics for over a decade. What should the rest of the country know about Governor Tim Walz for people who are unfamiliar?
Well, that's what I find interesting. He's being sold as this moderate, aw shucks guy who, will give us some dad jokes. But there's never been a more radical governor ever in Minnesota history. Legislation to turn Minnesota into a trans refuge state. Children can come here and change their sex without parental permission.
I want to shift gears to the stolen valor accusations against Governor Walz. I think people are just now starting to become more aware of this story. You've been covering it for a while now.
So I did this story originally. He was running for governor. It was very easy, I'll be honest, to substantiate these claims. These were 3 command sergeant majors in total that came forward to say that he left his unit high and dry before their deployment to Iraq, but more than anything, that he'd been using this rank, this command sergeant major rank, when he did not attain that rank, and he used it for decades. This isn't like a slip of the tongue here and there. I think this is part of his track record. Again, I've interviewed dozens of people at this point in my 20 years in Minnesota with connections to Governor Walz. He manipulates things. If you even look back at a lot of people I've interviewed, they use words like masterful liar. And, his support or lack of support, I should say, for law enforcement is well documented, and a widow came out and said, I don't want you at my husband's funeral. These 2 police officers and fire medic die in this horrible shooting in Burnsville, happened in February. And he wanted to come make a statement like hours after it happened. And the city of Burnsville said, no, we don't want you there. We've never seen that sort of level of pushback against a governor, at least in my time covering politicians here.